if you will, look in there in Matthew chapter 27, verse 50. And Jesus cried again with a loud voice, yielded up his spirit. This is not a fading breath of a man who has lost a battle. It is the final declaration of a man who has won the battle. He has finished his mission. He has completed his task. He's letting the world know that he has had victory over sin, death, and the grave. Jesus did not give his life, or did not have his life taken away from him. He gave it willingly. He cried out again with a loud voice. These words matter. It is intentional. It is controlled. It is on purpose. He is saying these words in victory. In his death, he was not a victim. He was a conqueror. In his death, he is and will forever be Lord. Amen. King. Master. He is victorious. He is not crying out of weakness. He's crying with authority, and creation hears it. Look with me there in verse 51. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split. The moment that he yields up his spirit, everything begins to respond. Creation cannot stay silent while its creator is dying on a cross. I want you to notice what Matthew does. He says, then behold. He's trying to get us our attention to look at the words that he's writing down. Then behold what happens when Jesus yields up his spirit. The veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom. Not from the bottom to the top, as if man was doing it himself, trying to reach God. It is God tearing it from top to bottom, giving access to us. God reached down to man. The barrier is gone. Separation is over. Only once a year was a high priest to go into the inner place, the Holy of Holies. Only a priest could walk in there. But now, the curtain's torn. Now all believers have access to God. Imagine for a moment you're standing at a door and you're not allowed to go in. It's not open to you. You can hear from the other side all activity, but you still can't go in. You know something important is happening in there. You're close. Closer than you've ever been. But you're still out. No matter how much you want to step in, the barrier remains. That curtain that separates you from God. That was the reality of the temple. God was not absent. He was not distant. But he was separated. There was this veil, this thick, heavy, immovable, standing between you and God. It was a constant reminder that your access was limited. You could come near, but not too close. You could worship, but you had to worship at a distance. In a single moment, everything changed. The curtain was ripped open. All access to God was accessible because of what Jesus did on the cross. The barrier wasn't opened slowly, it was torn open, ripped in two. The door wasn't just unlocked, it was ripped down. Because what stood between you and God was no longer necessary. The barrier was gone. It says there that the earth quaked and the rocks were split. The ground beneath trembles. Why? Because the cross is not just affecting people, it's affecting creation. Yeah. The earth recognized what most humans don't, that there was something happening on the cross. Something that had never happened before. The one hanging on the cross was the one who spoke the world into existence. Amen. Luke 52. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Now Matthew gives us a detail here in the New Testament. The graves were open. It's a line that's easy to just read past, but it's really important. It's not random. He's showing us that the death of Jesus did not only affect the living, but it also shook the realm of those who were dead. Because Christ did not die a victim. He was confronting and being victorious over death, the grave, and sin. It affected everything. 53, look at verse 53. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Notice the order. The graves opened when Jesus died, but the saints did not appear till after Jesus arose. Graves are open, but they didn't leave the grave until Jesus arose from his. Why? Because he's just not just some mixture of somebody who died and rose again. He is the first fruits. He is the first one that has actually conquered the grave. He is the source, the beginning of the resurrection harvest. Look with me there in 1 Corinthians 15:20. But now Christ is risen from the dead, has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since by man came death, but man also came the resurrection of the dead. Notice that the first one is a little m. The second one he's talking about is a big M, talking about Jesus. As in Adam all died, even so Christ all shall be made alive. When they would sacrifice their first fruits, what they were saying was that God is going to bless us with more. So I'm giving the first fruits to God. Because more is coming. Jesus is the first fruits. Resurrected. You say, well, now, Jesus brought people back from the dead, but they weren't resurrected. This is a different deal. Guess what? Lazarus was going to die again. He came out of the tomb, but he's going to die again. Jesus raised that little girl. She's going to die again. This is we're talking about a different thing here. When Jesus comes out of the tomb, those ones that have had their graves open, now they come and they go to town. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to have old Uncle Joe, who had been dead for 10 years, come walking through the door? They knew something was different. They knew something was happening here. Death was invaded. The grave had been disturbed. The Messiah had conquered death, sin, and the grave. That's why the cross is not just a tragic death. It is a victory hidden in suffering. Jesus endured the cross so that we could have victory over sin, over death, over the grave. Look at verse 54. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Amen. At first, all that Romans saw was a dying criminal. The religious leaders, all they thought was they getting rid of a menace, somebody that was going to mess up their playhouse. For the disciples, it messed up their hope. But heaven sees something different. It sees death being conquered. Amen. The veil being torn in two, giving access to God. The earth shook because creation had recognized the Creator. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? I told you this was the sermon I was working on for the Lord's Supper. And I had it written down in my notes, and I got to thinking about it, and I texted to the end of this because I thought, well, this is not just about the Lord's Supper. Every Sunday we come here, and what does it say? This do in remembrance of me. Now we automatically attach that with the Lord's Supper. Somebody wrote one time that the reason that people partake of the Lord's Supper or the Passover or the celebration of resurrection is to do it in remembrance. But every time remembrance is talked about in the Bible, it's a call to action. We remember something so that we don't make the same mistakes. That we celebrate what we've got because of what had happened. Yeah. This do in remembrance of me. Why'd I come to church? This do in remembrance of me. Why'd I give? This do in remembrance of me. Why'd I witness? This do in remembrance of me. We do this, all of this, serving Christ, praying for others, taking care of the needy, visiting and checking on people. We do all of this in remembrance of Him. Amen. This is a call to action. That we are better because of what Jesus did for us. Let's all stand. We have a song of